I can confirm, Mr. Chairman, the live stream is now being started.
Welcome to the meeting of Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee being held today on Friday, the 18th of November at Plough Lane. I'm Jonathan Lester, Councillor, and will be chairing this meeting today. For those present in the meeting room, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit to make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available on the public viewing at the Herefordshire Council's website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel. It's making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible. Keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones are turned to silence. Others are permitted to film, photograph, and record the meeting, provided this does not interrupt the business of the meeting. If there are members of the public who become present during the meeting who do not wish to be filmed or photographed, then please, you will have to raise your hand so that the person filming is aware of that. Only committee members present in the meeting room may vote. And we have one committee member who's attending remotely. We have a number of people in attendance as virtual participants. And if they wish to contribute to the meeting, can they raise their hands by using the function, raise hand function. Okay, so we'll welcome everyone to the meeting, and we will proceed with apologies for absence. We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Fagan, Councillor Hay, and Councillor Andrews. Are there any other apologies? No. Okay. So then, agenda item 2. We have name substitutes. So we have remotely, Councillor Milne is substituting for Councillor Fagan. But as I've said, Councillor Milne cannot attend in the meeting, so he's doing so remotely. So welcome, Councillor Milne. And we have a substitute for Councillor Andrews, which is Councillor Summers, who's no stranger to this committee, so welcome back. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest in any agenda item? No. Okay then, thank you. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on 14th of October this year. These are included in pages 9 to 16 on the agenda for approval. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Are you all content that I sign the minutes as accurate? Yeah. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, so those are agreed. Agenda item 5 is questions from members of the public. Unfortunately, no questions have been received from members of the public on this occasion. And agenda item 6 is questions from members of the council. But again, unfortunately, no questions have been received from councillors. So we move swiftly on to agenda item 7. So we are to discuss an update on the planning service. We had a previous meeting on the 21st of March 2022, where we scrutinised the planning service and put forward quite a few recommendations to the planning service. And we have had a response to that. And so this meeting will look at those responses, and committee members will raise any other issues they wish to raise at the planning service. We have planning officers in attendance, and we have Councillor Harvey who's the cabinet member responsible for the planning service, attending us via Zoom. So welcome to Councillor Harvey. And we also have Mr. Withers. Are you with us? Another planning officer.
I'm observing. Yes, thank you, Councillor Lester.
Well, you're very welcome. And from the planning team, we have Tracy Coleman, interim director of planning, and Kevin Bishop, head of planning. I forget the titles now. They've changed quite a few times, but responsible for planning, and Sam Banks as well. Neighbourhood team, neighbourhood manager, overall major supremo of neighbourhood planning. So you're all very welcome. And what I would like to do is allow Councillor Harvey the courtesy of a quick introduction, and then officers, if you'd like to make any introductory comments you would like. And then I would really like to get to a question and answer dynamic where members of the committee can ask their questions in response to the recommendations and the executive responses that have been provided, and then the other matters that the committee feel that they would like to raise. So to begin with, Councillor Harvey, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'd like to start by thanking the committee for its continued interest in the planning service and all things planning. As you can see from the responses that we've provided to the recommendations that you've made to the executive on the subject of planning, we're able to provide you with a certain amount of information on the work that's been going on in parallel with the committee's interests, and I'm looking forward to comments from the committee and any further constructive suggestions that the committee would like to make at this point. But you know, this is primarily the executive response to the original recommendations from the committee in the spring.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. And Tracy Coleman, you were with us at the time of our last scrutiny meeting in earlier on this year, but obviously you're now fully involved in helping run the planning service and are busy with an improvement plan. Did you want to make any introductory comments?
Yes. Good morning, Claire. Thank you. Just to give some sort of context and background, I've been now with the council since the middle of July. Obviously not here at the previous scrutiny. First of all, I would like to apologise to Scrutiny because I know that you have been made promises on a number of occasions for things to happen, and those things haven't happened. And I think that's because we've had a succession of officers in my post. When I came into post, this was on the horizon, and what I didn't want to do is to make lots of comment and detail when actually I couldn't qualify those comments and detail. I wanted to be in a position to be able to speak to you with a background and knowledge and information, and most importantly, how we're going to be moving forward. So unfortunately, at the time that I wrote the report, I was in a position where I didn't have sufficient background knowledge to be able to give you any meaningful response in moving forward. That being said, I've over the last couple of days, and unfortunately, I've also been off sick for a couple of weeks. But over the last couple of days, I have been speaking with Paul Walker and with our lead members, Councillor Harvey. I think that there are a number of sensitivities in where we currently are. This is because this is the first time these things that we're going to do a being table, and it's very important that we go through due process and speak to staff. So unfortunately, I'm not in a position to go into significant detail with you. But like I said, I would like to apologise that we are where we are. And I would like to just reaffirm that we are moving forward very swiftly now and in the right direction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Kevin Bishop, is there any introductory comments you'd like to make? I mean, you weren't at the last meeting, but you're very welcome to this one. Very much on the cold face, so it'll be very interesting to hear your comments.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allow me to attend today. Something which I tried to do at the last meeting, but unfortunately was, and I think a lot of the questions could have been answered at that meeting had I been here. So I brought with me Sam Banks as well, because Sam is knows a lot on the policy side as well, and it's very good from that perspective. I'm just happy to be here and answer any questions which come forward. I'd like to say it's been a breath of fresh air having Tracy Coleman in the team and supporting me and the other managers, and we're moving forward rapidly now. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop. Sam, you've been mentioned. Did you want to make any comments? I mean, I've got quite a few questions for the neighbourhood plan process, so I'm really grateful that you're here.
No, nothing further.
Okay.
From me. Thank you.
Councillor Durkin first, and then Councillor Summers.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, all. I'll try and take them in order of the summary, but I'm looking at recommendation B. I think, Mr. Bishop, you can help us with this. The response is that there's 7 planning consultants tasked with dealing with the backlog. To the date of the committee meeting report, they cost £50,000 and one still being retained, and the planning backlog has been cleared. A couple of questions. What has so far been the cost of these consultants clearing the backlog overall, and is it expected to continue? I see we have 1 retention. That's still carrying on. And finally, for this question, the planning backlog has been cleared. If you look at the planning search website and you call up any application, it gives a caveat there that there's a whole lot of work that we can't do at the moment, and there's going to be a bit of a delay in getting back to you. It's still there. And yet it says here, planning backlog has been cleared. Thank you.
I'll do the easy one first. We've got no consultants retained anymore. The last consultant we had was based in New Zealand, and was the best consultant of the 7. But we've now dispensed with his services as well. They did clear the backlog. The backlog was a batch of applications which weren't allocated to any particular officer. Those have all been cleared or are allocated to officers now as they come through. So those have been cleared. The backlog was cleared twofold. It was cleared not only by the consultants but also by our own staff as well. So we were able to attack it from both ends. That's how the backlog was reduced. We still have delays within the service, but not a backlog. We've got delays, but not a backlog. Sorry.
Semantics.
Yes, it is. In terms of the cost, there's the cost. It turned out the turnout cost was less than 50,000 in the end.
Can we just follow up?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you for that. It's good to hear that Herefordshire Council is truly international. New Zealand is amazing. I wonder what knowledge they actually had of the county. Never mind, that's an aside. I think this response could have been better clarified if the planning backlog has been cleared, but there are still delays, would have been a better response, in my opinion, because of this situation with the planning search saying there are still backlogs, and it is going to take a long time to get to you. Have we got that? Have you got that document, please, Mr. Rock?
Yeah, in a second.
Is it something that was taken off yesterday, the day before? There we are. Just for clarification, it's important that the people of Hereford should know that although the planning backlog has been cleared, there is still a delay. Now, what is likely to be the delay, bearing in mind the number of officers we've actually got on rota now?
Yes.
That's a different delay. The delay you've put forward on the screen there is the delay in processing and registering the applications in the first instance. Unfortunately, we have 2 long-term sick members of staff in that area, one of which well, we have 2 members of long-term sick. I can't say any more than that at the present time. And the matter is being dealt with in process. That time limit is actually we've plateaued and we're starting to come back down. Our target is 10 days, and normally we are well within that period. We are fluctuate around about the 5 to 7 days normally. But due to these 2 long-term sicknesses, we did move up to 20 days. We're averaging, I think it's 15 at the present time, and it's on the downward trajectory. So that is where the delays are at the present time. It's not a backlog. It's a backlog in our registration section moving forward, but it's not backlog in terms of officers having the cases in front of them processing.
Thank you. I think it's important, Chairman. That we recalled that it's not a backlog now; it's a delay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, could we go back, Ben? Could we just go back to the incident? Just in a second. So the point would be, does that paragraph really articulate what's going on there? Because I think that there's the danger of the confusion that it's because there's a high caseload rather than resources.
It's twofold. Officers have still got high caseloads. Officers still got caseloads of 50 to 70, but they're managing those caseloads. They are running through with those caseloads. What we haven't got is officers managing that caseloads and a separate pile of applications which are not being processed because there's no case officer for them.
So in your view, are you happy that that encapsulates what's actually happening?
I'm happy that encapsulates it. I'm not happy that we are there, but that's the issue we have with the officers we've got 1 vacancy within the planning team, and we're out for adverts on that, and we are very confident of filling that post as well. We've had at least 2 applicants, and we having my managers tell me, having viewed the work on that, the information submitted on that, we are confident that come the appointments, we will be able to appoint to one of those posts.
Okay, thank you. And can I just allow Councillor Bowes to come in before you, Councillor Sellers, because she wanted to make a related point.
Thank you, Chair. So you've got 2 people off on long-term sick. So is there a plan to cover that?
There's a plan to cover one of the posts, and that plan is in operation. And I can't say any more than that on that particular post at the present time, I'm afraid.
Okay.
The other plan, in addition to that, a number of the team have been doing elements of overtime as well to cover that as well.
Okay, so there's a resources issue that the committee might want to pick up on, but councillor Sellers and then councillor Kenyon.
Councillor Kenyon needs to go before me, I think.
Oh, okay, this is just related to this, Chairman.
Oh, right, good.
Is there any way of streamlining the process? Obviously, if someone can do it from New Zealand, that means someone else is going out and physically putting the posters up and that sort of stuff. You can look at the Earth from Google Earth, so you can sort of do all that sort of thing. Is there any way of keeping them in the office? But obviously, if they're not going to go 3 hours away to put some signs up, they can obviously get on with more work. So is there any way of streamlining it, the process?
Thank you. So the in moving forward, the transformation of the planning service, that is exactly what we'll be looking at. I think that the system that is used currently is very antiquated. It isn't the system that is in most planning authorities. So what we want to look at is processes, procedures, looking at IT systems, ways of working, and how we can improve on that. And that's something that we're putting in place at the moment.
I was glad you do let them out every now and again, but if you can keep them in the office longer, then get more done, can't they?
Good. Okay. Councillor Sellers.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Kevin, for listening to my concerns the other night and doing something about it. I appreciate it very much. So I look forward to better relationships in the future. But talking about relationships, we've had a very transient planning department for some time now. If I go back 5 years, I found it much better than it has been over recent months. I'm just wondering if the relationship between elected members and the planning department could be improved by the officer that's taken each ward or whatever part they have to introduce themselves or meet with the ward members so they can get on the same route. Because I think what's happening quite often is that the ward members and the parish councils in particular know a lot about their area, and that information should be listened to and used, because it would shorten some of the times, I think. Because you know, if I tell someone we've done this before, perhaps they can go right to it and find out rather than have to search themselves. So I think we need a better communications between ward members, parish councils, and officers, if you wouldn't mind. I know it's not down here, but I think it's something that would really make a big difference in the future. Because it would help me a lot. Thank you.
Chair, is it okay?
Yes, and just so officers know, Councillor Harvey, I think that's a theme that we're going to major on over the course of the next few minutes, because we've got comments from Councillor Bowes and myself where we'd like to explore those ideas.
Chair, would it be acceptable for me to just go through the scope of the improvement plan? Would that be helpful? I've just got it in the list. And
yes, I mean, I'm keen to have questions and answers. So
yeah, I think
okay,
that.
Go ahead, but I don't want to do a presentation.
No, it's not a presentation.
Could these be sent to us? We could look at them.
Well, we haven't had a formal document, but let's just hear what Tracy has to say. But I really want to get into that question and answer it.
Thank you, Chair. So the scope for the planning improvement plan is, if I can just quickly run through those things, is create a planning service mission statement, objectives, setting a clear vision for what the council wants its planning service to achieve, looking outward to what success would look like for Herefordshire, member, officer, stakeholder working, including a review of the expectations, roles, cultural behaviour, especially between planning committee members, ward members and officers, in order to build trust and confidence. Develop an enforcement action plan in order to update the enforcement plan, working with elected members to agree priorities. Review the structure of the planning service, the overall work programme and resource and budgets. Review the review of development processes, procedures, delivering improvement through change and using benchmarking. Moving on then, and then establish standing guidance for officers in order to reduce workloads, increase speed and introduce consistency in all areas such as ecology, drainage, conservation, heritage and validation. Review the approach to the council section 106 obligations, legal agreements, the correlation between capital projects and delivery, information systems such as Exicom, and the way in which we communicate with our customers, key stakeholders, and ensuring that the council's template section 106 is fit for purpose and that our guidance note is up to date. And then moving on from there, member training program, which we've actually already started. And we've already had 3 sessions, review ward member and public speaking, and just various things to the committee. So for me, one of the most important things about this review is the way that we communicate. And I think that through the situation with COVID, where all of a sudden everyone's working from home, we have more junior officers who probably need more guidance and help. That's what we want to look at and work with. We want to ensure that there's consistency, and we want to ensure that we go back to the ways that we communicate with all parties. And to me, that's a key factor.
Thank you very much. So sounds very good. I'll be happy when I see the action, because if I get a call from a planning officer saying he's taken over this area and could I help him with it, which I would expect, because I know the area and so do my parish councillors. If I don't know, I can go to them, and they're very, very well up on drainage, etc. Because most of the drainage you can't find anyway, and they know where they are. So I think if we start right away communicating with our ward members and your parish councillors, we'll get more information right away, and that will speed things up. I'm just concerned that you're reviewing all of this stuff and we're going to be stuck in reviews rather than immediate attention. I think we need the immediate attention right now. Thank you.
Chair, is it
That's
okay to respond?
Yes, if you want to respond to a direct question, yes,
Okay,
please.
thank you. So in direct response to that, the process that we will be starting is a 3-stage process, and the first part of that is to do interviews with some ward members, some of the parish councils, with officers, etc., just so that we can, because we've got someone coming in, a specialist coming in to do this, so that we can make sure, whilst we've got a list of things, we can pick all of these things up right at the very beginning, so that we know very important things that we need to prioritise.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Durkin, and then Councillor Bowes, and then myself.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at response D, talks about quality assurance and practices. Could I ask a question half the way down, just before the numbered sections? It says, with regard to planning conditions, paragraph 55 of the National Planning Policy Forum makes clear the planning conditions. Is that the right paragraph, or should it be 56?
That's good. That's a good question.
Can somebody get a copy of the NPPF, please?
I have it here, Chairman.
Oh, right, okay. Well, we're going to have to take Councillor Durkin's word for it, but it's
He has it.
Well, here we are.
The Bible.
Never without it.
And the answer is
Planning conditions and obligations start at 55.
they do.
Chairman, thank you for that, but the obligations are 55. The reference you're making here from 1 to 6 is in 56, I believe.
Okay, well, we've clarified that.
Thank you.
Right. Whilst we're on this particular item, I was at a parish council meeting the other night, and given the amount of parish councils I represent, that's not an unusual thing. One of the criticisms that was levelled at the planning decision-making process is that some planning applications had lots of conditions, lots of them. And Councillor Mill was referring to one that had 36 planning conditions on it. And it says here in the why planning conditions should be put on a planning application, and it says it should be kept to a minimum. It says the 6 points here. Shouldn't there be a 7th point that says don't put too many? The reason behind this is the scepticism that was expressed at the parish council meeting, and I've heard this quite a few times before, is what's the point of putting these planning conditions on if they're not monitored, if they're not followed up? There's no resource to check that these conditions are met. Because what I think erodes people's trust in the planning system is if there's a condition on there, it raises the expectation that that should be achieved. But if it's not being achieved, or it's not a very good condition to achieve that, that is undermining the faith in the process. So imagine you're me and you're at a council meeting, how would you have responded, and how would you respond in the face of the improvement plan that you want to see?
Thank you, Chairman. Most definitely, planning conditions should be kept to a minimum. They should be reasonable, necessary, and enforceable. Unfortunately, one of the reasons that we end up with a lot of planning conditions is the quality of planning applications that we receive in the first place. And a number of applications are sufficiently submitted to get them over the line, but not sufficient to provide all the detail on a number of occasions. And so if we was to reject those applications and we ended up with an appeal situation, they would all be resolved before we got to an appeal, and then we would probably end up with a cost situation. So that's an unfortunate situation, and from my very long experience in planning, unfortunately, it seems to be a bit of a downward spiral that submit as less as you possibly can, and if they ask for it, we'll submit it. This is also coupled with the fact that we are time constrained. And the to and fro in particularly asking for things, and particularly when you have a third party, such as a highways authority or conservation, who ask for more information, more detail, you have to consider whether that is significant in the determination of the application or its details that can follow. If it's a situation where it's details that can follow, you don't have any other choice other than to set it as a condition. That being said, this is obviously something that we want to look at and consider and go through and to establish if we are in the right place with that. Also, I would say that the remit from government has got wider and wider. And particularly we're now all in a situation with phosphates, etc. And so more and more and more things become included. And that is an unfortunate situation. In relation to monitoring, and this is ahead of anything, one of my recommendations is actually to have a development monitoring officer, and specifically to monitor development conditions. Also, I think that one of the things that I would like to look at is when we've got minor development, conditions, etc., that we have on there. I think also as well, we have to take into account that this is a very rural location. There are a lot of conservation areas, there's a lot of historic buildings, and because of that, there are specific requirements quite often to open countryside, conservation, etc., etc. I know Kevin would also like this one, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay. I have a follow-up question, but sorry, who was first? Was it Councillor Harvey or was it Kevin Bishop? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Well, had I been presented with that as a question by a parish council, I think I would have said the conditions are there to inform the applicant what is expected of them in the course of their undertaking the development. In the same way that we have rules of the road and laws that we expect everybody to abide by. The fact that the police might not have sufficient officers to be able to make sure that everyone abides by the speed limit all the time isn't a good argument for saying let's do away with the speed limit then. So there is a question of enforcement and there is a question of building control, and as you know, going through the planning process, the conditions are there to be signed off or for the applicant to request that there is an adjustment or an amendment to those conditions. But the expectation in setting those conditions is that those are the things that the developer is being told they need to do when they're doing the development in order to make it acceptable. And the expectation is that they do as they're requested. If they try and wriggle out of it or get around it, then it is a case of catching them at it. So part of what we need to do is to make sure that we have an enforcement strategy in the same way as the police go around with their speed guns and take samples in villages and on roads every now and then and remind drivers that they need to be paying attention to the speed that they're moving at. We need to have an enforcement policy which keeps people on their toes and makes them think twice about whether they feel lucky if they want to try and circumvent a condition. So I think the conditions need to be enforced. They need to be appropriate. That.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I think we got the gist of the points that we were making. Just cut out just right at the end, but no, thank you for that. Kevin Bishop.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to say that we issue in the region of 3,500 decisions every year, and the vast majority of those will be issued with probably one or two conditions. First one will be that commence within 3 years, invariably, and the second one, please undertake the development in accordance with the approved plans. So yes, you will get applications which will have a number of conditions, and I think the one which Councillor Milne was referring to, I think was a housing development for 230 houses, and to some extent you would expect a large number of conditions attached to those if we hadn't got all the information in. Yes, if officers have got the information, as Mr. Coleman has identified, you still sometimes need to have those controlling conditions, and as Councillor Harvey has identified, if you've got those controlling conditions on there, an issue does crop up, you've got the enforcement team have actually got something to hook on to get the developer to bring them back on board and carry forward the development in accordance with the approved plans, etc. So yes, we do limit as much as possible because that's what we're told to do, and that's what we do. The amount of conditions which are imposed, but the ones which are imposed are critical to ensure the development proceeds in accordance with the approved plans and have limited impact on the local area as well.
I mean, just to come back, and it's a really interesting point. I mean, we can think of conditions as being ensuring that the development is being done in accordance with the approved plan, and obviously, Councillor Harvey's right. If there are conditions there they need complying with, then the applicant or the developer needs to comply with those conditions. But it does beg the question that are we making the developer's life more difficult by backloading the issue rather than front-loading the issue? And yes, 36 conditions is probably not a lot, there are so many houses, but if they're going to the trouble of building so many houses, surely we should have squeezed the information out of them so that it was part of the decision itself, rather than going back and asking them to provide a management plan about construction or something to that effect, which they should have, they know what, they built houses before elsewhere, so we should have asked for that without making it a condition later on. And again, samples or something like that, if we're asking for details about samples, well, that house builders planned what they're going to build these houses out of probably 3 or 4 years ago. So, you know, we should be asking them to ensure that all of these details are front loaded, rather than create an industry for officers that takes up lots of time with dealing with compliance of conditions later on. Well, I think what would really free the feet of officers and developers is to minimise those conditions by having as much information enshrined in the decision as possible.
That'd be wonderful. So one of the things that the government requires is that through the planning conditions, we don't hold up development. There are a number of conditions now that we actually have to agree with the developer before we put them in. And we do send conditions to the developer to agree them ahead of that. Going back to what I was saying, there's a vast difference between what an applicant has to submit to get it over the line, and subsequently through the processing of the application and discussions with key stakeholders, highways, ecology, things come out of the woodwork that are not apparent at the time of submission. So therefore, you have to go back to the applicant. They then have to go to the third party. And if we take something like the Environment Agency, we have to wait for their responses. So if it's something that can be dealt with, it's not going to impact on the decision, and we have a duty not to hold up development. We ended up in an appeal situation, we would have costs against us if we tried to do that. So it's a balance and a fine line, and we always try to extract as much information as we possibly can. But like I said, the developer now, I mean, it's very costly to submit a large application. So consequently, it's submit as little as you possibly can to get it over the line. And if they ask for it, we'll give you it. And I'm not saying all developers do that, but this is something that is increasing more and more.
Thank you. And I've got councillors who want to come in, Councillor Durkin, Councillor Kenyon and Councillor Mill. Just one more question on this item. At the bottom of recommendation D response, just a little bit confused. So the development management team would like to produce a set of practice notes and guidance notes on specific subject matters for officers to further improve the consistency of decision making. It says this will be made available on the council website. And then it says time and resources will be required to produce these documents. This is for internal use only. What's that last sentence referring to? Sorry, this is for internal use only.
Yeah.
Because what it will be is for reference for officers as opposed to policy. Because if it was policy, it would be going through a consultation process, and this is effectively to assist officers, particularly perhaps more junior officers, in order to get consistency in approach. And going back to what I was saying about having a note on specific areas that are repetitive, like for instance, you may have conservation application, and instead of just automatically keep consulting conservation, you know, you've got a set of questions, and well, not questions and answers, but you've got a set of criteria that officers can refer to, and then the public can understand and know, and that could be helpful them too. But it isn't set policy; it's just guiding officers to probably repetitive situations that keep occurring over a period of time, which will then speed everything up and make things more easy for officers to review.
I think I understand. It's saying in the same paragraph, these are made available on the council website, but then for internal use only.
It's to give applicants the awareness of what officers will be looking at.
Right.
So it's to ensure that consistency across the board.
Right.
We have, as is stated, we have a lot of young officers within the team and that. And it's to ensure that decision making across the breadth of the teams, of the three teams, works in terms of the decision making.
Okay, I think this is for internal use only, and this will be on the public website. It's confused me. So
Sorry about that.
So practice notes for officers will be made available for people to understand their decision making process like that. Okay, all right, great. I'll iron that out. Right. We've got Councillor Durkin, Councillor Summers, and then Councillor.
The other way around.
No, we've Councillor Milne as well. Anyway, Councillor Durkin.
Me too.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at an article relating to the PAS review in 2020, how well is it informing what you're doing going forward? Was it agreed by the Cabinet that this PAS review should be in part of the overall strategy for planning? And where are we at the moment with the overall business cases that you are mentioned in E? Thank you, Chairman. Just to help, the action gave a due date by the 30th of October. I wonder where we are with all this whole action.
What recommendation are we?
Sorry?
E.
Sorry, yes. E.
Yeah.
Pick up some. So in relation to the Planning Advisory Service report, all of the recommendations that are made are part of our review, and that is all been mapped out, ready to start. And obviously there's been a position where, it's talking about Neil Taylor here, who was a previous interim, then there was another interim, and we are now. But all of these things form part of the improvement plan that we're actually bringing forward.
Thank you for that. Was it agreed by the Cabinet that the PS review would form part of this overall look at planning services? And I wanted to know how are you getting on with it when the review date was supposed to be the 30th of October? And what are we looking at now with regards to an end date for a report?
I can't confirm, because obviously I have to go through a process with CLT, the Chief Executive. But my proposals are that the end date will be the 31st of March for a report. actually employing a planning transformation specialist to pick up all of the individual things that we've got, and they will be starting on the at the beginning of January to go through all of the things. So once I'm able to give you the programme of what we're doing and all the paperwork, then I can give you more detail. But currently, it hasn't got far enough for me to be able to express it at this meeting. But as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I started in the middle of July, and I can only apologise for my predecessors of what's been failed to do. But I've gone back through all the pasta, and certainly we're picking everything up, and we will be doing everything that's been said that we will do. But obviously it's taken long to do that, and I can only apologise for that.
I've got plenty of you to apologise for any predecessors. You're doing the job now. You seem to be taking the ball by the horns, if I may say that. It's just that there are a number of issues within this report by the executive that are undated. There are no end date to it, and that I think needs to be addressed. And I'm welcoming your timetable going forward.
Yeah.
When, I mean, to be fair to you, somebody specialist coming in January, you can't possibly know what they're going to think and how they're going to act. So I think that we were welcome to the chairman, to the committee chairman, that we do actually get a timetable,
yeah,
especially for this, because this is an important subject, and it's already been pushed back to the end of March. Already pushed back to the end of March in your estimation. So I think we need to crack on with this as we are. But I think a timetable would be very, very helpful going forward.
Can I just clarify that? I do have a timetable, but it hasn't been approved yet, and so I'm not in a position to share it. The work will start the beginning of January, and we're looking to have a report for completion by the end of March.
Thank you. My point is that we're getting all these dates whooshing past us, nothing happening.
Yeah.
And when you've got an approved plan, that would be very, very helpful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durkin. Councillor Summers.
Councillor Mill.
Oh, Councillor Mill, thank you.
And then
Councillor Mill, you've been waiting patiently, have you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on enforcement, and thank you for covering the points that I would have done around the numbers of conditions and their inherent enforceability. I don't necessarily believe that there's a sort of proportional metric that would suggest that just because an application is a large one, it necessarily needs an awful lot of conditions. So going back to the PAS review, that was recommendation 5, which asked us to develop an enforcement plan, which was picked up obviously by General Scrutiny when it met in March under recommendation F. The question I simply have is, and I know Tracy referred to it a minute ago, is where are we in relation to the development of that enforcement plan? I mean, it really is important, I think. I know, and I recognise what Councillor Harvey said about speeding, and anybody with an urban ward like mine will know that if you've got for example, a 20 mph speed limit and the police do not enforce it, and the reason why they don't enforce it is because they regard it as unenforceable. And they will say, well, it's unenforceable because Herefordshire Council hasn't done its side of the bargain, hasn't put in the traffic calming and so on. So what we need to be really sure on, and that's so underscored by NPPF 59, effective enforcement is important to maintain public confidence in the planning system, is to ensure that our conditions are genuinely enforceable. We don't put in conditions like, you know, asking a maintenance program on a planting scheme that goes 6 or 8 years in advance, by which time obviously people have long since moved away, and there's a drought and half the planting dies and nothing happens. I think as a scrutiny, if we continue to offer challenge to conditions that are inherently unenforceable, we're doing our job well. But I think if I can ask officers how that enforcement management plan is going, are 5 of the passive review recommendations.
Point of order, please, Chairman.
Is that
just come in before you answer that? I'm just a little bit sick and tired of councillors knocking motorists. There's just as many bad cyclists that go through red lights and cycle the wrong way. So can we please stop that? We're not a council of motorist haters. Well, certainly I'm not.
Okay, point taken. Okay, right. Tracy Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just answering your first point in relation to conditions being enforceable? The majority of planning conditions are standard conditions, and the reason that standard conditions are used is because of case law, and they have gone through case law, and they are enforceable conditions, and so we have to look at it from that aspect. So we do use standard conditions in a lot of circumstances. And from a professional opinion, there are reasons why they're there that might not appear correct to the public. In relation to the enforcement plan, we do have an enforcement plan. It is on our website. It does need updating. The officers did update the enforcement plan, but since I've been here, it's been held back, and that reason is because I want to go through the process of clearly understanding that everything that we've put in there is where we want to end up. And like I said, as part of this process, we want to interview various parishes and members and our customers. So this is very much embedded into our process in moving forward, and this is one of the very key elements that I want to review and to look at. And so whilst officers did do what they was asked to do, I didn't want to sign it off because I want to clearly understand that actually what's in there is sufficient, and I want to go through the process before we actually do that, to make sure that it is fit for purpose for the future.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure we'll come back to Councillor Mill again, but Councillor Kenyon and then Councillor Summers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just picking up a few things. Often people plan it start on the basis that everyone's trying it on, everyone's trying to get more than they want at this time and the rest of it. I'm interested in different stages and making it simple for the user, because that's what it's all about, it's making it simple. So I want a extension on the back of my house. I've owned the house for donkey's years. Do I need planning? Now, you've got that in place, but it should be kind of, do I need planning? Yes, you do. Then the next thing is sort of planning up to 10 houses and planning above 10 houses. Now, developers, they're the big boys. They know the score. They know how to play the game, right? And it is a game. You play one off against each other. They want to give as minimum as possible. And as officers, council officers, we need to extract as much out of them at that front end, because as soon as the plan is done, there's no going back and saying, oh, by the way, we've got this and that sort of stuff. So they need to be looked at and managed. So I think a lot of this can be taken out. I know you already do it, but a lot more can be taken out. Of the 3,500 planning applications, you know, how many are big ones? It's the big ones that take all the time, and perhaps going for the quick wins, because I hear more bloody planning nightmare. Yeah, that's what you hear. But wouldn't be refreshing to hear excellent planning experience, you know, because I'm sure that's what you'd want to see. So it's kind of breaking those down into under 10 houses, over 10 houses, do any planning, but making it easy for people. I'm setting you up to answer a question here, Kevin, but making it really easy for people to know and understand. Because if you just want an extension of the back of your house, you don't understand. So let's make it simple.
There's a few issues there. Number one, as Kevin just said, we do actually get compliments. A lot of this actually goes to resource. And one thing we are not, and that is planning consultants. We provide planning consent and we do provide advice, but those that want advice in detail have to pay for it.
Yeah, I understand that.
And that's something else that we want to look at, the pre-application advice that people can actually get. But we're not a planning consultancy, and we do not have a resource to give extended amounts of advice to people. Planning consultants are out there to do that, and sometimes it can be very adverse to do that, because if you go too far and people submit something and they don't get approval on it for various reasons, because you can only give advice on how long's a piece of string and you don't generally have all the details, then you set yourself up in a serious position. But I fully accept the concept of what you're saying, and that trying to make it easier, not only the process easier in smaller applications, but also easier for officers to process through, and for us to focus on the bigger applications, the ones that are going to cause us the most issues as we go through. So that is something that we're going to look at too. But I do have to say that, unfortunately, we do not have a resource to provide free advice in detail to applicants unless they pay for it.
Can we come back on that? I mean, it is a business and you do charge, and it's like that you make money. But if it's run, if you put a business twirl on that, you should absolutely be doing that, because you can make money from a quick win. If someone, you know, that's my feeling, and it needs to be run as a business, because you could actually make money for the council. That, you know, everyone wants us to spend on potholes, but there's 100 other things we need to do. But that's the angle you should be getting at, is coming in from a business angle of how can we make money, because that's important too. Yes, legislation, you need to make sure everything's done right, but how can we make money too?
Thank you. And there's two elements to that. One is we will be reviewing the pre-application process, but also what we will also be doing, and that is implementing planning performance agreements, excuse me, with larger applicants, and that is a kind of a contract that you sign up with the developer, and they pay you an amount of money. It's a reasonably large application. It can be something in the region to £20,000 to £50,000, and that means then they get advice before they submit their application on what they should do, what they shouldn't do, etc., etc. It also discusses a process in when they're going to submit things to the council, when we're going to respond to them, when they're likely to submit their application. And that's something that I will be introducing, and that will bring income into the council.
Just one final remark, really, Chairman, if that's okay. I'd like to see this run as a business, and I'd like to reward the officers that do the business. If they do a good job, rather like in any business, they perhaps get a bonus or something like that. You know, let's look at things like that, bonus-related, work-related bonuses, because when you've got something like that, it gives people incentive to work even harder. And when perhaps morale might be lacking a little bit, you think, okay, I'm going to get into this because, okay, so I'd like to see it run as a business right the way through. So bonuses for officers, you won't hear me say that again.
Unfortunately, I'm afraid it's a statutory service and we're not able to do that. But I think the bonus to officers is from applicants being happy and satisfied.
Excellent planning experience, what I said.
Exactly, and that is the bonus to officers.
Can I just, before you come in, Kevin, on the back of Councillor Kenyon's point, any idea of how many pre-app applications we've done in the last several years? Because if we're interested in reviewing that service and improving it, would it not be a good idea to have a customer satisfaction survey sent to all of those who've experienced the pre-app service in the last several years, so that those responses can feed back to see if we can improve or gauge the service as it is now and understood now? In mind to try to improve things in the future.
We most definitely will be taking a sample, but there's absolutely no way that we would have the resource to go through everyone, and also the time taken to do that would not be beneficial. I think what you do look for is trends, and hopefully through a sample we'll be able to pick up trends.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Summers, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. Pre-planning was on top of the list. I'll get to that after. Just want to, I feel for you, Tracy. And I think the executive needs to take some responsibility for the issues we have. It's not your fault that the hiring practice leaves a little to be desired in the past couple of years. We've seemed to be going one step forward, 2 steps back a lot of the time, because the people we hire are not either leaving or not doing the job. We have to hire somebody else and they have to relearn everything. So I appreciate what you're going through. It's not your fault. I think it's the executive have to look at their hiring practices, quite frankly. And that's beside the point. A pre-planning application. Now, I'm glad we got into it because I find it very useful. There is a cost to it, and I'm always sending people to pre-planning. But I wonder if on pre-planning applications, there's a charge for it, but some of that money was clawed back if they decided to go with a planning. I know there's a planning fee, there's a pre-application fee. I'm just wondering if there could be something balanced in there that gives some incentive to come to pre-planning, because you will get some of that on if you decide to use the planning service. Portion of that could be put into it.
I would have to say that what we have to do is cover our costs. We can't charge more than our costs, and
right.
So we couldn't do that. We can't take money to give back in order then to give somebody the money back.
No,
that's not really.
Well, you wouldn't be giving the money back. You'd only be, if you had pre-planning, it was you could have two prices for a planning application. If you've had pre-app, which makes it a little easier, because you'd be paid for some of the work that's been done then, and an application right from scratch. Anyway, that's just a thought. It's something
I think that there's lots of different things, because quite often what happens, somebody comes with pre-application advice and then goes and does something completely different, or something that's half different, and you still got the same issues where they've took part of what you said on board, but not all of it, because they wanted that extra bedroom, even if you told them they couldn't have it. So it would be very difficult to arbitrate who's actually towed the line and done what you said they would, or who's gone off piece and done something completely
that's where
different.
the work councillor comes in again. Okay. If you get the work councillor involved and you bring them into a meeting together, I'm surprising. Back in my first 4 years, that we had quite a few of those with planning, and there was some good results made. So I appreciate that. I could just leave that one from you, but I will go into one more thing again about ward councillors. I have a situation, well, it's not situations, we're looking at over 1,000 homes in North Bullen, for example. There's a lot of stuff happening because of different things, which are sometimes political, but at the end of the day, I have a lot of trouble dealing with Bloor homes. They won't deal with me. My planning office, they've got there's a list this long. If they came to me and said, let's talk about this, maybe I could give some incentive, what parish council could say. But we put that out to everybody else, but I'm left to join the rest of the crowd, if you want to. So I'm not brought into it early enough. I'm not brought into something that big often enough, if you know what I mean. So I think there needs to be a lot more communication. If, you know, we've had problems with Blurred Homes, for example, in Ledbury, where they got away with what I think was murder, but they got away with it because they.
Councillor Sutton, I think expressing your frustration with the process of planning, it'd be wise not to focus on individual developers.
Okay.
Because I think
My mistake.
you're highlighting the frustration of the process, and then your language is bordering on blaming somebody for that, and I don't think that's wise. So I would suggest that
Withdraw.
withdraw those comments, because it may be construed as something that you didn't mean. So
Okay.
your theme is that
The theme is that
between the developer
council-
and the board member role and the community, there seems to be a lack of communication.
That's simple enough.
Yeah.
Withdraw the rest of it, but quite frankly, there's not enough communication on a thing, something that big. And we all know that, so we need to get back to that.
I fully understand where you're coming from, Councillor Summers, in that respect. But this application has been ongoing now for quite some time, and it goes dormant for quite a long period of time as well. So the case officer will come back to you and will update you as things move on. I haven't personally spoken to the case officer recently regarding this application, but what I will do is ask to contact you to update you further on that specific application, because I know which one you're referring to find out where we are in the process of that application, to see how it can come forward. It has been impacted by various decisions which have been made, and as a result, we may not be having a development as originally planned, but that is something which a case officer, I will ask them to update you with.
I'm having the same question from my parish council, who actually had the developers into the parish council meeting a month ago. So, and that's the only way I can learn anything is by parish council. Got the mail. Thank you.
But with respect, Chairman, that may be even before the case officer hears anything.
Yes. There's always that possibility. I mean, I'd like to come back to the point that Councillor Summers raised in relation to recommendation G. But before I do, I'll go to Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Chair. I've been unusually quiet because I've been making notes. So I'll cover lots of things in one question, if that's okay, because I've got an appointment at 11:15. So with regard to the reports, there's a lot of actions noted in the report, but they don't actually have action owners and end dates or anticipated dates for completion. So I think when you're doing your review, Tracy, I know you said you're covering everything in there. I think it's just important to make sure everything is covered, because there are things that say we will do this and then no action and no date. So that would be great. Enforcement, I think we definitely need to ensure we've got the resource and the background, but also that the public have visibility and confidence in the fact that we are going to enforce, because a lot of feedback I get is, well, it goes to enforcement and then it goes nowhere. Not just planning enforcement. So that's something that I find we really need the public confidence in. With regard to Councillor Kenyon's idea, I understand what he's saying, and I think sometimes simple flow chart to say, have you got 10 houses or less, might be a bit of guidance. Have you got 10 houses less than? Yes, no. Is it this big? Yes, no. Just so that people can visually see. So, because I know we've got a lot of links on the planning website, but actually it isn't, for somebody who doesn't do planning very often, it can be quite confusing, where a little flow chart, yes, no, at least it can point you to the right piece of guidance. Or so I think, there could be some quick wins, because some people may be clogging up the system that don't actually need planning, or don't need to speak to an officer. Pre-app, I've only been involved in one case where somebody asked for pre-app and paid for it, and the officers didn't have a discussion with them. They didn't come out to site, and actually the member of the public was pretty cheesed off with the service that they'd received, because they thought, I'm paying for Priya. But actually, I haven't even spoken to an officer. I've just had an email back saying X, Y, and Z. Had there been a bit of two-way discussion, you know, they might have thought that they were getting something for what they paid for, but that didn't happen. I just wanted to make a point on something Councillor Summer said about previous staff employment. It isn't the executive that appoint people, it's the officers that appoint people. I don't believe that anybody from cabinet appoints staff. That's something that officers do. I don't think cabinet members are involved in that.
Can I come back on those?
Oh, one more, the last one, sorry.
I beg your pardon.
So, the role of the ward member, personally, luckily, I don't get many planning applications in my ward, and I'm really pleased about that. I have a big one at the moment in my ward, and I find it incredibly frustrating that I am chasing the officer for an update. I understand it's a big application, but it's been going on, seems forever and a day. And the review date is constantly amended, and I'm every month chasing for an update for the parish council, and it's, oh well, something else has happened now and something else, but I'm chasing. And when I say, oh, what's an anticipated date then for review or recommendation, I know it's frustrating, but there isn't one. That's the response I get, and I find that incredibly frustrating. Even if once a month, it doesn't have to be the officer themselves, an admin assistant could email me and say, just to let you know, councillor, this is the latest update. It's just incredibly frustrating when we're chasing, and actually the response back is worse than useless, in my opinion. It doesn't give me anything to go back to the parish council with. So I think communication and planning is definitely an issue with big applications, but I don't have any issues with little ones, but I don't have that many. Thank you.
And can we just look at, on that specific point, you've got recommendation Q and the executive response. It's about how case officers will telephone ward members. So that's the executive response.
So in relation to who employs who, at director level, service director level is usually by the leadership team. At the corporate director level, that's usually agreed by an employment committee at that higher level. Just on that, in relation to sort of, you said so much, I'm lost.
Enforcement and flowcharts for Councillor Kenyon and Richard.
All right, yeah. So in relation to enforcement, as we all know, enforcement is a discretionary process, and a significant number of enforcement complaints are not actually enforcement complaints. You get civil issues, all sorts of different things, and quite often they're neighbour disputes. People want to use the planning system, they're civil neighbour disputes, such as boundary disputes, etc., etc. So a lot of people try to use the planning system instead of taking it up through a civil process themselves. And so a lot of people are disappointed because to them it's quite obvious that someone should be looking at this because it can't be right. And we have to tell people that actually that's not the planning process. Secondly, when there is another piece of legislation that actually provides for that provision, such as environmental health legislation, etc., then we don't deal with it. You know, like for instance, if you've got just say vehicles unloading on the road at a certain time, unless, you know, unless there's sort of on the site and it's relative to that application, there's nothing that we can do about it from a planning point of view, but we can maybe from an environmental health point of view, etc. The way you've got other legislation, those two pieces of legislation shouldn't overlap. And I've just used that as an example. There may be circumstances where we do look at it. The other very interesting thing about enforcement is that we have to consider the public interest. And the public interest is not just about enforcing an issue, it's about the cost to the public and being able to enforce that issue balanced with the outcomes, the likelihood of success. Now, I've had situations where I've, you know, considered going to the High Court to enforce the situation. The cost, versus the outcome, the benefit was completely disproportionate. That being said, there are also a number of situations where if you took enforcement action, like say for instance, someone's taking down a key bank wall when there's a condition on the wider development, if you enforce that, you have to accept that you might be enforcing a couple of thousand, because a lot of people have. So you have to then consider why you're doing it. And it could be that it's a listed building, it's in a conservation area, it's going to have a massive impact. So in those instances, it's right and proper to do that. Unfortunately, every single case is completely different, and the merits of that case are very different. And the public only complain generally when they're at the end of their tether and they can't take any more, because that's what we do in this country. We put up with things so we can't take any more. And so it becomes a very emotive subject. One thing that I always say in lots of authorities that I go into is it's good to talk. And sending someone an email that says it's not expedient, bye-bye, is not acceptable, because the member of the public has no idea what expediency is. They are at the end of their tether and they are upset, and they've come to you because they feel that you're the only person they can go to. So for me, the most important part of enforcement is communication and explanation. And that is where we have to improve, and that's where we have to get better.
Just wanting to come back, I completely agree with all your scenarios, and I find that in lots of things that I get involved in, you know, the public are at the end of their tether and they are frustrated when they don't get the response that but at least if you explain the reasons why, then I'm not saying they're always happy, but they take on board. And I think that is one of the things about communication, and also involving the ward member, because if they come direct to you and you give them an explanation, they don't understand it, they then come to us and say, I've had an awful service, they don't do anything. And we don't know the ins and outs to go back to them and say, well, actually this, and we can give them a bit more detail. So I think communication is definitely key.
I think Kevin's going to respond to you about.
Just on the ward member input on the major applications,
Yes.
and it's just that the officer will update you when there's important aspects to update. There will be quiet periods. I know in your particular application there's been information which has come in, highways, retail impacts and things like that, which need to be assessed. And once those have all been assessed, the officer will come back to you and update you in terms of those. So there will be quiet periods. Sometimes that can take over a month. And then nothing has changed because information has come in or is waiting to come in before it goes out for consultation again.
But even if somebody just replied back and said, just to let you know, Cal, there's no movement in the last month.
I can assure you, officers are not twiddling their thumbs.
Oh, no, not the
Waiting.
officer.
We haven't got any admin assistants.
Yeah.
We haven't got them.
I think, you know, there's a situation of resource.
Yeah.
And where we actually put our resource. And what, you know, what can happen is, particularly with large applications, I could call you one day and say, nothing's happened, and then all of a sudden we get a response back from the Environment Agency, response back from elsewhere. We also need to look at those, we need to review them, we need to go through them. I think there has to be a balance of, you know, what we can do, what we can't do. And it goes back to that sort of, what worries people most of all is the unknown. But I think that what Kevin's saying is correct. If we do have something to report back on and we do have something to say, then we will say. But, you know, from a resource point of view, as Kevin said earlier, you know, officers are carrying significant workloads. If we want to change our service to incorporate more things, that's fine, but it does mean that you need more resource to be able to do that. And as you know, as the years go by, resource gets tighter, and the service that we can provide has to get sharper. And so therefore, we, you know, it's not always possible to report back on nothing.
So really, if my expectation is I won't hear anything until there's something, so when I'm asked, that is the expectation.
Yeah.
Unless there's something to report, it's just in the background.
When something is important, when the application reaches a stage where there's been significant changes since the last time the police officer updated you, and you've got a very experienced case officer involved with your application, she will contact you and update you as to where we are and where we're looking to move forward to in terms of a decision as well, and what route that will take, because obviously it's important that you're involved in that decision as well.
Can I just come in there? And I think one thing that will help in the future is planning performance agreements. That is because within that agreement clearly set out the timeframes of when different things should happen. Those planning performance agreements will go on our website, so everyone can look at that, and then people can say, well, you know, they said they was going to do that by then. Has that happened or has it not happened? So I think that will be a great improvement, being able to set out the sort of expectations of the application.
Okay, well, we've got three speakers wanting to speak, but just let's come back to that point, Tracy, if I may. This is the point I was going to raise, but we're at that junction. You're talking about performance measures being introduced. Recommendation G was a protocol request for a protocol, so that the communication between officers and members could be better understood. That protocol, so that all of these issues that Councillor Summers and Councillor Bowes and myself and others would raise, because largely a lot of the time it's the councillor that's in the hot seat at the parish council meeting, at the public meeting, at the meeting where people get quite emotional about applications and things. And if it's a large application, a room full of people wanting to know what's going on, and they look to the ward member to say, well, what is going on? What is going on? You know, we've heard nothing. You know, all these types of comments, right? So our recommendation was a protocol. The executive response is a workshop. And the workshop is to help members understand the role of the ward member in their community. Not entirely, I'd like to push back on that response, because Well, I've been a ward member for quite a long time now, and I've been involved in planning applications for quite a long time now. I'm pretty much au fait with my role as a ward member, and I'm sure all of the councillors on this committee are pretty au fait with their role as a ward member when it comes to liaising with the planning committee, liaising with parish councils, liaising with agents and officers. So a workshop is not what we were after. What we're after is a document that says, makes people aware of the situation that a ward member finds themselves in. And if they go into a meeting with no information, or well, I haven't heard anything from the case officer, so I assume nothing's happened, that gives the impression that the ward councillor is on the outside of the planning process, sat there with the members of the public, not knowing what's going on. It's that relationship that needs recalibrating, and that's not a resource issue. That's that you know, I don't buy the argument that making a phone call is a resource issue. So I think what needs to happen is an understanding, a protocol, a document, rather than a workshop. Because you know, workshops can be good, they can be bad, people can fail to attend that workshop or fail to watch the recorded video afterwards. You know, it's that nailing down that understanding of the relationships that I think is really, really important, so that members don't feel that they're on the outside of that process. They're it's part of the local planning authority playing their key role. So I think whilst workshops are good, I don't think that's the good enough response to that recommendation. And in view of that, I'd be interested in your responses.
Can I just pick up the one element of that, and it's part of the communication. Communication is two-way. Invariably, because as officers, we don't know when your parish council meetings are, and invariably, I will get a call from a councillor. I've got a parish council meeting this night. I need an update on this application, please. And it's provided, and officers do that. So you know, I think it is a two-way process. That we don't know when your deadlines are for the parish council meetings. So you know,
Jeremy, can I come in on that? Just support Kevin. That's what I do. I just phone them up. I often phone Kevin and say, "What's going on with this?" I don't know at the moment. I'll get someone to send you a report. And that's how I do it. And if every other council did it like that, well, it's problem solved, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's a really good. But the point we're making is the protocol document. I think that spells that out rather than a workshop.
I think we've got some very experienced councillors in this room who know how to communicate with their officers and how the planning system works. The key issue for me on communication is that. And I will play the COVID card now, because before COVID, we met councillors all the time in the atrium, etc. We met for all the officers were meeting councillors. That when COVID came along, that completely stopped, and we haven't got back into that mode. We haven't got, and that's where the workshop, because I think we need all to get back in a room together, to work together, and that's how we will move forward and get those better relationships. There's better relationships with members, because you're right, we work as a team. We work as a team, members and officers, to drive forward applications through to various decisions, and it's only through that. That's why I was slightly disappointed that the three sessions we've run recently on enforcement, code of conduct, and 106 were all run online, because I wanted to get members back in the room. It's like it's planning committee. We're now back in the room. We're back here, and officers communicating with members before the meeting and after the meeting, because that's as important. Discussing other applications, where they are with them, etc. And that's where we need to get back to.
So would you say then that it's not a protocol that's needed, it's just better relations that are needed?
Yes.
I think also there has to be proportionality. because I came to this authority, the masses of strings of communications on particular cases that have gone on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And so one is proportionality and perhaps accepting from the officer that's it, but also from myself as well as from the officer side is how we explain something too. But also I think there has to be an acceptance. You're not always going to get the answer that you want, and actually keep coming back isn't going to change the answer. And unfortunately, I've actually seen a number of not particularly friendly remarks because members haven't got the answer that they actually wanted. So as Kevin said, there has to be that two-way thing, and there has to be proportionality, because the planning officer is supposed to work 7.5 hours a day. They rarely work 7.5 hours a day. They work far longer than that. The more time they are spending communicating a specific issue backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, they're not actually dealing with it. And, you know, if an officer has on average 50 to 70 cases, it's 50 to 70 times that they're actually having to do that. And that is a rolling amount of new cases coming on and older ones going. So we are time constrained in what we're doing, and there has to be a certain amount of proportionality and a certain amount of acceptance. You're not always going to get the answer that you wanted.
Okay, we've got the cabinet member wanting to come in. We've got 3 people wanting to question, and Councillor Bowes wants to come back at that. I'm aware of all those things, but so everyone will have their say. But Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. Just to come back, I do agree that you know, we need to build better relationships, officers and councillors. But I also don't think we can use COVID all the time as an excuse. I manage a team in Bangalore and I manage a team in the UK. And I've only been to Bangalore once and met them all face to face. And we still have great relationships. We have Teams meetings regularly. So I think we do have to build relationships. But I don't just think it's about attending a meeting physically. It's how we get to know each other. And yes, often you get to know each other outside of work more than you do when you're at work. You know, I've done more team events with Bangalore outside of working hours where you get to know more about the person. But I do think there are things like Teams where a 2-minute chat face to face would make such a massive difference to everybody's understanding. I can send an email, an officer can receive it and may not read it in the way I've intended and vice versa. So I think even if a 5-minute Teams call, you know, once in a while, this is what's happening, especially with big applications. I've only had 2 in 7 years.
Yeah.
I hope not to get any more, by the way. I just think,
Lucky.
yeah, 2. I just think it is key because, as Councillor Lester says, we're on the smart end of a parish council meeting and you say there's no update and they say, well, the date's changed, it was going to be looked at in this date and, you know, the review date. And they get asked questions when they're out in the street and, well, the review date's changed, so what's happening now? Oh, well, there is no update. And to the public, they don't understand, you know, what's going on. And it just seems frustrating because they think, well, if the ward council and the parish council don't know what's going on, do you know what I mean? And I think maybe a 5-minute Teams call once in a blue moon might help that.
Okay, right. I'm conscious we've got committee members who want to ask questions. Councillor Mill and then Councillor Kenyon, and then we'll go to Councillor Hartley.
I just want to go back to the question of the pre-application process, and I recognise that recommendation L of the general scrutiny in March asked for a review to be undertaken of the service to ensure that it delivers value for money and is effective. And I recognise that the lead development manager confirms that that review is underway, and that is great for applicants. I do wonder, though, what we can do to improve the process for the general public. I mean, it's coming back to the NPO PPO 59 thing of maintaining public confidence in the planning system. That I mean, very often when an application comes forward and it benefits from pre-app advice, which presumably has given a steer to applicants that their submission may well be approved or is approvable, that the general public feel that by that stage it's a bit too late to get into the detail over the negotiation. So doing the pre-app, and I do mean more than just ticking a box and doing a couple of hours on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a remote village hall, to have, for major applications at least, a genuine process of engagement with the public is something I very much support. I mean, it's very much a civic society movement ethos that we would encourage. And I just wonder whether, as a scrutiny, we what our view would be on asking officers to encourage this. That's it. Thank you. That's my question.
Simple, we do. It's in our statement of community consultation. As part of that we advise applicants to hold community events, so that and I can see Councillor Bowes nodding her head because he probably beat one with a last major application.
I think they were advised to do it, but they didn't.
Yeah. We know we can only advise them to do it. We can't insist upon them doing it, but it is in our armoury, same as it is in our armoury as well, to ask them to bring ward members into the discussions as well, early as well. Some agents and applicants are happy to do that, others not.
I know my experience in the ward I represent is where there have been major applications, the applicants have hired village halls and done very comprehensive consultations. So if that was at the heads of officers, then that system is working. But I think, Councillor Milne, is it that you would like that procedure somehow brought more to the fore, more advertised more?
Yes, I mean that I would certainly welcome that. I mean, I do recognise, as Kevin says, that we can't insist upon it, but we could encourage it with a sort of greater degree of I don't know, resolve and than perhaps we do at the moment. Just for major applications to make the applicants aware that this process is very, very welcomed by communities, and to do it meaningfully and not just as a tick box exercise, as so frequently seems to occur.
Can I pick up on that?
Yes, please do.
Going back to what I was saying about planning performance agreements, when you're on major applications, I would like to see planning performance agreements on as many major applications as we can. And this will set out the process that developers will go through in order to communicate with the community, with members, etc. And as I say, that is something that will go on our website for everyone to see. So hopefully, when we've got that process in place, things will improve to that respect in the future. But it is a voluntary process. We can only encourage. Whereas if we get developers to sign up to the planning performance agreements, it's something that they voluntarily agree to do.
Well, there you go, Councillor Milne. There's some way of proposing and promoting that relationship. Right.
Chairman, can I just come in?
Oh, yes.
Officers do use as much persuasion as they can to get them to do the community consultation, because it's an important part of the process. Because applicants know that, or officers know that, if the public are well informed, it can, in some instances, it can prevent objections coming in. That's why officers encourage as much as possible. We don't sit on the fence. We tell them, go out and undertake the community engagement.
Well, there you go, Councillor Milne. I hope you suitably reassure.
Okay, that is reassuring. Thank you. The question was worth asking, and I applaud officers for doing that. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Kenyon, and then Councillor Harvey's.
Thank you, Chairman. I never know if this is the right time to say things, but I'll just throw these questions in now. It is a scrutiny committee meeting after all. I've got 2 points. One is enforcement of follow-up. We've talked a lot about that today, but one is specific. One is to the College Lane planning permission. It was a big development that's still going on. And I do remember I sat on the committee at the time and they said they weren't going to pay any 106 money because the ground was so contaminated that it would cost them an absolute fortune. Now, I have asked the question in the past, how many contaminated lorries left that site? So I know it's random, but I want it in the public domain. How many contaminated lorries left that site before they started putting the house down? Because it's all part and parcel of what we're talking about. So that's the one point. Thank you, indulge me. That's all I'm going to say on that, but I'd like an answer on that, please. And the second bit is about 106. Can we talk about that briefly?
Yes, well, one thing I would say is resist the temptation to talk about specific applications.
Absolutely, I've got you, Chairman. I'm told off.
And then I think Mr. Bishop will give you an answer to any of those related questions with enforcement. But on 106, let's have a discussion on that.
We're talking about things generally, and I just want to be a little bit more specific. Thank you. Said that one quite well as well, didn't I? So the 106. What I feel the 106 when it comes to we used to have like a mythical unicorn that ran the 106 and that sort of stuff, and you can never kind of get anywhere near it. But that's all changed, I'm glad to say, and it's a lot more informative, and councillors know where, how, and what I should be speaking about. But the 106, my kind of beef about it is it should be more loose, it should be more transferable, certainly when it comes around recreation and sports. Because if you do recreational areas and that sort of stuff, I'm thinking is specifically the athletics track. Now, people all around the city of Hereford would go and run on that athletics track, but often it's quite specific to the area, to improve the area where they live. Well, things like that, I know they go on to a pecking order and that sort of stuff, but if they were looser in that this money must be spent on recreation and sport within the city or within the county, I think that's a better way of doing things, because I think they're just too tight and too specific. If it's not spent in a certain way in a certain place, we actually lose it. So I'd be interested to know the answer to that.
So in relation to section 106, section 106 contributions have to be proportionate and directly related to development. They also can't be required where you don't have a project or where you have something that's fully funded. They also have to comply with the SIL regulations.
Yep, I'm all over that. Yep.
That have SIL. So the whole purpose of section 106 contributions is to mitigate development. And as a local authority, we have to demonstrate the need in order to mitigate development, particularly where you've got a very large site and you've got EIA, environmental impact assessment, and you've got to mitigate impacts to the environment. How I always describe it is the pie is only one size. And you have to slice it up in accordance to the areas that need mitigating. If we have corporate projects where just say, for instance, we want to take contributions for sports and leisure centre, just for argument's sake.
Mention the athletics track again.
athletics track.
Yeah, thank
What
you.
we need to do is we need to demonstrate that there's a shortfall and that there's a need. We need to demonstrate there's a project, that project has been costed, and from a proportionality point of view, so that development might be 5% or whatever, but we need to demonstrate that it's not fully funded, that there's a project, the project's going to move forward, and that it's necessary in order for that development to move forward. Because all development has to effectively wash its own face, and it should not create a financial or physical bearing on the existing environment. And so it's very difficult to just take things. Secondly, what you can't do outside of a voluntary environment is have a wider scope, as you're expressing, because developers are quite happy to mitigate the development, but what they're concerned about is they might give you money for certain things that are closely related to their development, then you go and spend it somewhere else further down the road, and actually they don't see that as being closely related to their development. And we can't take it. We cannot take it unless it is directly related to development. We cannot take it. And so in legal terms, when you've got a legal agreement with them, you have to be very specific, because if you're going to enforce against it and go to court because of a certain issue, you have to be specific. Otherwise, you get absolutely nowhere. And so there are lots of controls in place that really decide what you can and can't take. And what I would say is the more projects that the council have got, and the more situations where you've reviewed that you've got a shortfall, the more opportunity planning officers have to be able to take the contributions. But going back to what I said, the pie is only one size. And whether that's affordable housing, whether it's highs, sometimes what happens is when an application comes in order to mitigate something, then maybe you've got to put a massive great big junction in, purely and simply because that junction's tipped over in capacity, and you can't put 10% of a junction in. The whole junction's got to come in, but it's way over and above what the development in proportionality. So instead of taking a contribution and then it's sitting there and the development goes ahead, that you haven't got the rest of the money forever and a day, and so nothing happens, and then everyone says, well, you take the money but nothing ever happens. What you can do is, in those instances, is spend more money on getting the whole roundabout done and taking less things in contributions for other areas. So it's about balance and it's about proportionality.
I completely understand that, and I understand as it goes to schools, this, that, and the rest of it, it's all proportioned down.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, when it comes to the recreational sport, those people don't always do the recreational sport where they live. Now, is that for the benefit of the area, or is it for the benefit of the people that live in the area?
Yeah.
Because if you look at a different angle,
Yeah.
it can then be, you've got that in negotiation at the front end with big developers we're talking about now.
So what you would need to do is you would need to demonstrate in that specific area that you have a shortfall. Now, I had quite a few years ago, I had a bit of a ding dong about swimming pools and about whether there's a shortfall in swimming pools and people go to swimming pools, and whether you need contributions to swimming pools. It's the same type of thing. But effectively, in order to be able to take those type of contributions, you've got to take the borough, the county as a whole, and you've got to look what resources you've got. You've got to look at what development's coming forward and whether there's a shortfall. And if you can demonstrate there's a shortfall across the county, and you can demonstrate that because of that there's a need, and that you've got a project and that project is costed, and you can demonstrate that that project is going to move forward, then you can take contributions for it. But you have to put all of those things in place first before, and that's not something that the planners do. The planners take that information. Effectively, the planner is the middleman and or lady, and you know, you can only take what projects are there that are costed up.
No, I get that, and it's like the Carlsberg moment, everything coming together at the right time and happy days. A little while ago, a few years ago, it was all going towards an Ayleston Park football pitch, and every bit of contribution was going there, because I know this, 'cause I had to fight for a little bit in my area to actually stay in my area, because it was going off like that. So I'm not saying we need to do that again, but it was done before. But it's more this part of for recreational use. That's what it's for recreation, and it's the people that do the recreation, not the place.
On the other side of that, developers can give money to what they like. You know, I've just come from an area where a developer gave £25,000 to a scout hut, and parish council and everyone else got really upset because the scout hut got 25,000, but they lobbied the developer, and the developer said, you know what, I want to shove 25 grand in the section 106 to give to the scout hut. So if you can get the developer to willingly do something that's outside of those remits, that's entirely up to them. But good luck.
No, absolutely. But I have been involved in those sort of things. Ed Thomas used to work at Herefordshire Council, but that's what officers need to be looking at or mindful of. You know, let's look at the regulation. What can you do? Because at that time, before they've got the planning permissions, that's the time to ask these questions. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Can you ask these questions? Can you reinforce it with planning officers?
You can, but you've got to remember the pie is one size, and you've got to balance up the needs of the development in order to mitigate the circumstances that make it come forward, which means there might not be any money left in the pie. And even if the developer said he would, he won't, because you end up then in a viability situation. You end up losing affordable housing. So, you know, it's something.
It's like a game of poker. It's like a game of poker, trying to get, just like I said at the beginning of the meeting, you know, you're trying to get as much out of them as you can, and they're a business and they need to make money for it to go ahead. Completely understand that. What I'm saying is ask the question whether recreational, rather than being stuck in the area where it's stuck, can be moved around within the city or the county if required.
And only if you can demonstrate no need.
Okay, right, a few more questions. Councillor Bowes has had to leave, as she said, so she gives her apologies for the rest of the meeting. Councillor Harvey, you probably want to comment about comments that were made some time ago, so apologies that coming back to you, but you had a flow of questions there. But over to you, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, really. Yes, it did start a while ago, but I think some of the discussion that's been going on just now is equally relevant. This agenda item is about the executive's response to the recommendations that Scrutiny made in a previous meeting, and so we're here to discuss the executive's response, or for you as a committee to note that. For recommendation G, which you were talking about, Scrutiny asked for a local protocol or a charter for communications. The executive response is to say, we think there is some additional training that is needed to make sure that members fully understand their role in the process and at various points in the process. Now, as Tracy Coleman has said, that training programme is underway, and hopefully members are getting better acquainted or reacquainted with the points in the total planning process, and that's going right the way through from developing planning policy, which is what we've got going on now with the update of the local plan, right the way through to development management end of things, where individual planning applications come through the planning process and either get decided under delegated powers or go for referral to committee. Now, if as a consequence of undertaking that training, the committee still feel that there are gaps to the portions of the Constitution which relate to planning, which are in several places. And there is a fairly detailed comment in the Constitution about what officers do and what members do, and how the information flows between officers and members throughout the planning process. And if there are elements of those sections of the Constitution which need improvement, then perhaps the committee could consider whether there is some work that needs to be done there, with recommendations going forward to an amendment and update of those sections of the Constitution. And that might be a helpful way of dealing with things.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Harvey. Just to clarify, the purpose of the meeting is twofold. One is to review the recommendations from the executive. The other part of the meeting is to add any further constructive challenge to the improvement process. So this meeting is not just focusing on the recommendations, it's focusing on any other further constructive challenge that the committee offers. Thank you for reminding me about the Constitution, because there was just one thing that I just wanted to ask officers, and I know Kevin Bishop and I have discussed this. Part of the referral process to committee, there's a clause that says that if a ward member wants to call something into planning committee as a redirection, it's got to be done within 3 weeks. Now, a lot of the time, ward members will only call something in if they think that there's sufficient people who would possibly disagree with the recommendation or material considerations that they think are worthy of consideration. But 3 weeks into the process, the planning officer doesn't even know which recommendation they're going to be recommending, because they haven't heard all the arguments for and against and all of the responses. So I think if there's an amendment that needs to be done to the Constitution, it's getting rid of this scenario where the ward member has to explain themselves as to why they didn't call something in within a 3-week window when they didn't know which way the wind was blowing. Yes, please do so.
I think that from my experience, one of the problems you have with extending that time period is when you've got some small applications, minor applications, that there are actually a significant amount that officers can get through in a very short period of time. And what we aim to do is get application through as quickly as we possibly can. So when you've got something that might go through pretty quickly, if you extend that time period, what it would mean is you have to, obviously you've got your 4 weeks, but what it would mean is that you would have to wait before you could determine that application to see if amendment's going to call it in.
But that's not how it works in practice, because an officer will write to the ward member and say, I've credited the numbers, I've done the whole process, and I think this is my recommendation. Do you want to call it in?
Right.
And then we say, oh yeah, go on then for these reasons. But then, because of the way the Constitution's worded, Kevin Bishop is then going to say, well, you're out of your 3 weeks. Explain why that is. So it just looks clumsy. But Kevin will speak more about it, know more about it than I do.
We did ask for it to be removed in the rethinking governance. Somehow it was retained within it, but it's not. It's an additional sentence I have to include within my redirection process back to, and invariably a councillor will not be able to review seek redirection because the public interest hasn't come forward on the application within the 3 weeks, because the site notice has still got another 2 weeks to run, etc. So it's something moving forward. Hopefully, will be picked up again in the future. That 3 week period will be removed. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Right. Okay. Councillor Durkin, sorry, and then Councillor Summers.
Thank you, Chairman. I must thank Councillor Harvey for the explanation as why the committee's recommendation for a large protocol or charter was ignored or not considered specific enough to actually to give it in the executive response. It would have been helpful if the question could have been answered more fully. But going on to that, I welcome these mandatory workshops that we have with children's services and planning, because it's all information that is relevant, current, and we do need to know. However, I look, and again, I'm sorry, Tracy, but I'm on the date thing again. It's got down here that they're organising an external workshop on the 30th of September. I take it from recommend that was statements you made earlier. It's not going to happen until after March.
No, it's not that it's no. We will be doing various things, but that will be between January and March.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, I'll make sure that we do get a broad spectrum of planning. I mean, 106. We've had a taste of it, but going forward, I mean, when you have mandatory training, it should be a broad spectrum to do our jobs.
Yeah, we've had 3 so far.
Yeah.
And this was written at a time before the Queen unfortunately passed away. So there was a slight delay there because the training did get delayed because of that. So we've had code of conduct, we've had enforcement, and we've had section 106. So those are 3 we've had. There's
A
more.
couple of those were quite early on, weren't they?
Yeah.
I'm not intending the criticism. What I'm merely reflecting that I give an example of this one, which is G. The date by when dates missing. We've got J, K, and L with dates missing that need to be addressed because they are important issues.
Yeah.
So going forward, I fully agree with what's been said about the 3 weeks. It all seems to me to be a banal, ridiculous situation where you're expecting to get redirection. You don't know what's happening fully in the locality. But I would like that to be considered. The other thing I like to be considered, and it strikes me as being again ridiculous, is the new situation where members are only allowed 10 minutes to speak at a committee hearing. If you've got a large or complicated case to put forward for your constituents, your residents, it may take longer than 10 minutes. And I think it'd be excellent, maybe 15 under any new review of the Constitution. I think that would be beneficial for our residents.
My advice has always been little is often better. And the chairman has always got the discretion to extend the period for you if he so wishes. If it, particularly on major applications, you may want to speak a lot longer, and the chairman will give you the discretion to do that. But quite often, and this is with my significant experience that I've got, is that when a member produces an application, if that member goes on quite considerable time, it's stopping the debate because members in the committee want to get into the nitty-gritty of the application, want to discuss it. And 10 minutes is a long period of time for someone to speak. But that's my professional advice to you, is that 10 minutes is good, or up to 10 minutes. But on the major applications, the chairman will always consider an extended time period.
Thank you. If I may just come back, I like your experience, Kevin. I respect you highly for what you do. But as a norm, looking at me, you don't have to take up 10 minutes. No, you have to take up 15 minutes. But it's very helpful to have a norm that you can actually reflect on something that needs to be dealt with. And again, I agree with what you say. And I will say that if you've got a complicated issue, you consult with the chairman. Yes, of course you do. But it's about being able to represent. The last one I did was 10 minutes. And it wasn't enough time, and it's reflected in my community. So I'm just going from the beatings on my back, Chairman.
Can I just also say that obviously when you're a planning committee, people do want to go home, and when you do have a large complex application, you get a significant amount of people who want to speak, And so if you had it as the norm all the time, it could be a pretty difficult situation. And I do think that it's best to keep it on a case by case basis. That being said, it is something that's in the past recommendations, and it is something that we will actually be looking at, and we will be talking to members of the planning committee about it, because I think it's important that the members of the planning committee, it's a discussion for them. So that is something we'll be looking at, but we do have to balance that up with the amount of time that these things actually take.
And just to add to that, the 10 minutes was introduced as a result of the past review.
Right. So in your experience, Kevin, at what point do committee members turn off? Is it 11 minutes, 3 seconds, or?
I said they turn up. I said they really want to get into the debate of it.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Because they've had the public speakers, they've had the officer's presentation, and they themselves have got questions that they want to start asking themselves, and they're being delayed.
So my observation would be then is that when it comes to officers and members refreshing their outlook about planning committee, realise that you have these timeframes and these scopes, but at the same time, say to members, there's chairman's discretion, you've got to use your time wisely, and these pointers, so that we can, and Kevin's point about there's members who are part of the planning committee who are chomping at the bit to get involved in the debate. Be mindful of that and your mode of going about it because of all these factors. And I think we don't have this discussion, do we? We haven't had this discussion. And setting a time limit and setting a protocol or setting a procedure, that's all well and good. But I think it would be helpful if we had a more general discussion about the reasons for this, and then thinking about how most effective to use your time in a planning committee. Because there is the expectation from members of the public that this is where the ward councillor will say their bit for their community and that. So there is that pressure, as Councillor Durkin alludes to.
Yeah, I would say that make a factual remark if I may, Mr. Bishop. So we're the bad guys in this, are we?
Can I just say also as well, I think that it's really important if a member feels he is going to go over time and he specifically feels that there's an important point to be made, that they consult with the chair before the meeting starts, because it's not fair and it's not reasonable to put the chair on the spot. But also what we do have to consider the importance of the planning committee. It's a quasi-judicial process, and we have to make sure that it's respected and considered as a quasi-judicial process. You know, I've had planning committees where we've had to have security people there to calm people down, because obviously some of these subjects become very emotive. And so if we are going to have circumstances where the ward member feels there's a specific points and it's going to take time, if we can do that and get the agreement ahead of time, it sometimes then can calm the situation and respecting that it is a quasi-judicial process.
Okay, I've got Councillor Summers and then.
So Chair, which are on for 10 minutes, I need to leave in 15 minutes. So if we need to vote on something, I don't know if you're going to be quorum. I need to go in 15 minutes.
We will be, but if there's anyone who wants to bring forward a specific recommendation and vote on it, like, please, by all means, bring it forward now. Councillor Summers and then Councillor Mill.
When it comes to time, I have a very short attention span, so 5 minutes is usually sufficient for me before I start phasing out.
Who said that?
I'm afraid so. I lose the will to live sometimes with some of these speeches. This is a compliment, by the way. I've been to 3 workshops in recent weeks, enforcement, water fix, and health. I found the health really interesting for the simple reason we have people from the health there, we have people planning from there, and we have board members there. And one of the things that Kevin knows that I'm very much about is health and well-being. And I don't think there's enough well-being looked at in planning, to be quite frank. So I found it very interesting that it was really good, because I talked to people that know what their particular, what their emphasis is, and there was quite a bit of agreement on my thoughts that health should be more involved, and they were involved in this meeting, which was great. I thank you for that. I know it wasn't you that put it on, but it was a good meeting, and I think we need more like that with everybody, the health, the planning, and ward members involved, because it really was good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just come in on that point. Part of the health agenda we are taking forward as well in the new local plan, and that's probably why I think it was one of the policy officers who was at the meeting, because we're looking to bring that more into the planning policy area as well. So I think you will see more and more of that.
Thank you. Councillor Mills.
Sorry, just about the on the first couple of workshops we ran, there was a very poor turnout from members. It was very disappointing.
Yeah, it was. Councillor Mills.
Thank you. If Councillor Harvey will allow, this is an area not touched upon by general scrutiny in March, and which I would welcome an officer response. That is supplementary planning documents, to get an understanding of how useful they are. Have we got the right ones? Do we need more of them? I mean, I recognise that we recently commissioned an environmental building standards, which is very good news, and that's in draft. We've got an affordable housing SPD, also very good news. The other local authorities, I'm just doing some scanning as the conversation's been going on of SPDs around sustainable transport, renewable energy, biodiversity, climate change, and a host of other things. The SPD that I missed most when I was elected was the design guide, or design code. And I recognise that since then, government has given a lot of encouragement to local authorities to develop design code SPDs, and indeed there's a national design code. So, I mean, the reason why I say that is because the SPD that I inherited, which dated from 2011, was just very specific to Hereford city centre shop fronts. It was a shop fronts design code, and it clearly was it's not a document that could be given any weight to, because it belonged to an earlier plan period, and it was a badly needed document, I felt, because we had no means of giving guidance to applicants, for example, in their advertising in conservation areas, and it becomes quite difficult to ask enforcement to pick up on garish advertising when you don't have an SPD with adequate weight in that design area. So I just wondered if I could ask officers for a view whether we have the right SPDs, whether we need more, what progress is for design for that design code SPD. Okay, that's it. That's my question.
Thank you. I'll just pick up on SPDs generally, and Sam will pick up on the specific about design. You probably know that supplementary planning documents are supplementary. So that means you have to have a primary policy. I always say, like, your local plan is the skeleton, and supplementary planning documents are the flesh that hang off the skeleton. Therefore, you have to have a primary policy in order to hang off a secondary policy. So things such as climate change, etc., have all come along since our previous local plan. So we don't have primary policies for those things. What we have to do is wait for our local plan to have new policies so that we can then hang off supplementary planning documents that incorporate new policies. So because we're spending lots of time on the local plan, you're juggling what do you do first, the chicken and the egg. scenario. And a lot of authorities prepare them so that they're ready to be adopted at the same time as the local plan. That can also be a dangerous scenario, but you can do lots of work and then things change because your local plan takes you a couple of years. So since our last local plan, we've had the introduction of design codes in the format of the way that the government have introduced them, and there's been various funding. And we have had part of that funding, and Sam will explain to you in more detail about where we are. But certainly, SPDs are living working documents. You can update existing SPDs that you have, but you can't introduce things that you don't have a final policy for unless you've got that in your local plan that's adopted. Yes, having lots of SPDs is a wonderful thing, but we've got our team working on significantly at speed on the local plan at the moment. So that's where we are prioritised in a lot of our work.
Thank you, Tracy. As members will be aware, we were part of Design Pilot 1 from central government. As part of that design pilot, we work with parish councils about how they can integrate design coding into the review of their NDPs, and that's what we'll be looking to roll forward. We're also looking at part of the local plan to have a Herefordshire design code, so an overarching code for the county, of which these parish and market town and city design codes can sit underneath. And as Tracy said, we received some grant funding, and we are using that to upskill a member of my team who is currently on an urban design course. So they will be able to input into that design work going forward.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got two questions. One actually is for Sam Banks, and it's a question about the relationship between the core plan, the local plan that's currently going on, and how that's going with parish councils and then NDPs. That's a theme I'll develop. But before I go on to that question, so give you the opportunity to have a think about that. And a question for Councillor Harvey. So on reflection, we've talked about performance, and we've talked about resources and high caseloads. And, you know, I think this committee acknowledges that we ask a lot of our planning service. We're a rural county, it's a large county, it's a lot of room to cover, a lot of area to cover. And so whether it's officers dealing with high caseloads, planning applications, planning is challenging at the best of times. We all know that, and we've all experienced that, but it's a very challenging role for our officers to undertake, and so they've got a tough job, and we thank them for all the hard work that they do. But of course that includes policy development as well as planning enforcement, which is another very challenging role. So we have an improvement plan because we realise that we're always on a journey to improve our services. And that we've had the PAS review, and we've had the insights of Tracy coming in with a fresh pair of eyes to think about what needs to improve. So I think my question to Councillor Harvey is, given that there will be an improvement plan, in her view, does she think that the council has got the resources to deliver this improvement plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we're going through the budgeting process at the moment, and part of doing that is looking at what the resources are that are required in order to deliver on our plans, and to ensure that the services that get taken forward are able to be delivered within the funding that's available. So part of putting the improvement plan together is making sure that the funds are available within the revenue part of the Directorate's budget to be able to realise that plan and deliver on it. As far as the local plan is concerned, we have funds in reserves which have been budgeted for and set aside, recognising that the local plan would need to be updated, and the cost of doing that is an irregular cost, because it only happens once every 5 years, but it is part of what we plan to have happen, and the funding for that is set aside and is available, and officers are working within that budget.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you for the explanation, but the question was, are there sufficient resources? Are you saying there are sufficient resources?
Well, Councillor Durkin, as the committee has heard from Tracy Coleman, she's put a plan forward. That plan is in the process of being considered. If it is going to be approved, it will be approved with a budget to capable of delivering it. But that plan is being considered at the moment.
So the answer is, I don't know at the moment. Is that correct?
My expectation would be that we would be approving a plan with a budget sufficient to deliver it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, and I take it, Councillor Kenyon, you're going to have to leave. Is there any other questions that you would like to put to the committee?
No, it's absolutely fine. Thank you. It's been very informative this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. And just finally, the question I alluded to, right? Sitting at parish councils who've done their neighbourhood plans and they're being told you might want to review your plan, then they're being told that the council's local plan process would finish by 2025. A lot could happen, a lot could change between now and then. Governments could come and go with new policies, new planning, new white papers. It's very difficult from a ward member perspective to advise parish councils on how to regard the review process. And we're all there busy trying to polish our crystal balls to see into the future as to how they should regard neighbourhood plans and the neighbourhood plan process. My question, I think, really is, are we confident that we are giving parish councils and communities enough advice without caveating that with, well, things could change considerably?
So all neighbourhood plans that are made remain part of the development plan until they are replaced. So even though we're producing a emerging local plan at the moment, those neighbourhood plans remain as the development plan, and they remain at the available weight. So there is no reason for parish councils at this moment in time to undertake a review, unless there is something specific in that plan that they need to update and review in the short term in line with the current core strategy. So as part of the development of the local plan, we're involving parish councils in some of that work. And just recently, in fact, in the last 2 weeks, we've had workshops. We've had one with members, we've had one with parish councils, and then we undertook one on Tuesday online for those parishes who couldn't make those events. And we've been asking them questions about settlement hierarchy, what are key facilities, what do they see as sustainable in the rural area. Part of that message for them is don't review your neighbourhood plan at the moment unless you really need to under the current core strategy, because we can't be certain at this stage about which settlements will be in that settlement hierarchy. So as that work emerges, we will be, as a neighbourhood planning team, speaking to those parish councils on an individual level, because it will be different for each parish council what that advice may be, because some parishes will continue in a settlement hierarchy, some won't. Some will have some parishes that some settlements that are, and some will drop out of the settlement hierarchy. So it's easier from our point of view to have those nuanced conversations with those parishes when that time is right. And that's what we're saying to clerks at the moment. When the time is right, we will then individually come and speak to you about your best course of action to go forward.
Okay, I think that's really helpful. That's really helpful. Right, do I have any more questions? Councillor Mill? No, right. Just finally, I've got one. Oh, right, Councillor Mill?
Yes, just a quick question, really, very short question. And again, it's not an area of the planning service that seems to come up either at the PAS review or in scrutiny in March, and that is the application of Article 4 directions. We don't seem to make a lot of use of Article 4 directions in Herefordshire. I don't. Maybe that's an unfair impression. I mean, the purpose of them is to increase the protection of designated and non-designated. Designated and non-designated heritage assets and their settings, chiefly evidently in conservation areas. And I just wondered if I could get an officer response on whether I'm being unfair here, why this is so, whether we should be making more use of them.
You're quite correct, Councillor Mill. We don't get many requests for Article 4 directions. But we have used them. We issued one last year, which was for removing permitted development rights on land out towards Cradley, and that was to remove permitted development rights on an area of land out there. We've used it before that previously on a public house to prevent it being moving into a different use. So we do use them, but we don't get very many requests for them.
Sorry, can I just add that you have to be able to justify the reasoning behind it, and quite often there needs to be a piece of work, particularly with heritage sort of situations. There has been most recently a couple of Article 4s that haven't been confirmed, and particularly in relation to new permitted development rights, purely and simply because the justification wasn't sufficient. I think they're very good to use. But we have to justify the reasoning behind them, or otherwise you may struggle to get them confirmed.
Okay, thank you. I hope this doesn't necessarily imply that we have to wait until our conservation areas are on the at-risk register, because permitted development has hemorrhaged their
conservation areas don't go on an at-risk register.
Oh, they do. Yes, they do. Historic England recognised them on their at-risk register along with listed buildings.
Yeah.
We've got two of them in this county.
Right. Okay. I would say to you that a significant amount of work would need to be done in order to justify it. There are two sides to it. And that is, if you put an Article 4 direction on a conservation area, it means that you're not going to get any income on those applications where you've taken permitted development rights away, which can have a significant impact to the council. So that's something that you have to factor in. I'm not saying it's a reason for not doing it, but also we would probably need to make a growth bid for resource situation in order to do that. But I'd just like to remind you that actually our conservation team don't sit within planning.
Okay, two quick fire considerations for Councillor Harvey and officers. We mentioned 106 agreements, and we discussed a little bit about 106 agreements, and we also talked about potential for, with regard to our concerns about conditions, having a monitoring officer. Is there the possibility to extract 106 contributions to contribute towards a monitoring officer? That's one question, and then recommendation M is talking about doing default works through untidy land. It says in there that there's no budget allocated for direct action. So this is where council will pay someone to come along and do the requirements of the notice if they're tidying up land. And then it talks about you can put a charge on the land, but it may take some time for that land to get sold. But has the council, in response to this recommendation response, consider the fact that there are procedures to force the sale of land where there is substantial debt on the property.
I'll come back on that one. Fully aware of that. It goes back to public interest and balance, cost implications, justification, etc., etc. In relation to untidy sites, I would say to you that you have to be very careful, because what one person considers something that they think is acceptable, another one doesn't. There does have to be a balance, because you could end up, if you enforce on one, where do you stop? Because, you know, where's the level, where's the bar? Because the expectation is then that you do more and more. But most definitely aware of the tools that are available, but always in every case you have to consider it on its own merits. And as I say, the public interest has to be taken into account in relation to cost implications of actually following it through and what the benefits are going to be.
I think the point, though, I accept the point that you raised, but in saying there's no budget, it makes it sound like you know, never going to get that money back. So it's a real problem. Whereas if you do get that money back, that's you're getting your money back plus you've solved the problem.
I would say most local authorities don't have a budget for that. Certainly most local authorities that I've been involved with don't have a budget, and the reason they don't have a budget is because you've got to go through quite a significant process in order to get the money, in order to justify your position. I've never known a local authority not follow through because they haven't got a budget for it. But you know, how long is a piece of string? You know, I've had an enforcement situation that ended up costing the council over £1 million. I've had ones that have cost £200,000. You know, unless if you have a budget, it can be completely irrelevant because you don't know what the price is actually going to be. So it should be considered on its merits, and it shouldn't be because it's within budget or it's out of budget. It's because it's necessary, and the council have deemed it to be necessary, and whatever the cost is the right and proper thing to do.
Okay. Right, Councillor Durkin, and then I'll be looking to round up come to the conclusions of the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I know the planning officers are under a tremendous workload, and I, for one, I'm sure others appreciate the hard work they do put in for them on behalf of the council. And I, for one, have a very good working relationship with my officers, free-flowing conversations, teams. But I wanted to be put on record my appreciation, and I'm sure other councillors' appreciation for the hard work the planning officers do.
And can I just come back on that, as someone who's new to this council and works at many different planning authorities around the country. I was actually trying to think of how many different counties I've actually worked in today. And I can say this is not a failing planning authority.
No.
You are very, very privileged to have a full complement of staff. I can tell you of local authorities where they don't have one permanent member of staff. They're all interims. You know, I've just been working at a local authority that's first local authority since 2014 to go into designation, who are absolutely struggling even to keep interim staff. Planning is very emotive and it's a very difficult work area. This local authority determines a significant amount of applications. We are in the highest 50 in the country of most applications. There's a benchmark that the government puts is on quality, and that quality comes from how many applications are allowed at appeal. And in this country, up in England, it has to be below 10%. And just speaking with Kevin, you know, at the moment on majors, we're at 0.8%, which is absolutely fantastic. And so, you know, the authority that I'm talking about was at 17%. We're at 0.8%, and that's on quality of our applications as determined by this, by PINs. And so, yes, there's always improvements and there's always ways of doing things better. And one of the things, the key things that I think are really important is how we communicate with each other about our processes and procedures, not only to make it better for our customers, but to make it better for planning officers, looking at the IT software that we use, which desperately needs updating in order to make sure that we can be more efficient in our working processes. And it's very right and proper that we constantly look to the future and look to personal improvement. But our starting point is actually a very good one, which is really good to know.
Now, I think it's very important to recognise the officers for what they do, and not just accept it for what they are doing.
Yeah.
So on that theme, and then we'll go to Councillor Summers and then Councillor Hill. How are we communicating that appreciation to our staff?
Well, this morning, with having a number of staff come to me, some in tears, following the last scrutiny meeting, where there was no one was able to provide answers to the questions you quite rightly raising, but the appreciation we've had this morning will go a long way, because there will be a lot of members, there will be a number of officers tuned in today to listen to see what was has come about of the previous scrutiny meeting, etc. So comments like that and that'll be around the room will go a long way, and I will make sure that it's taken forward as well into the managers' meetings I have every Monday, and into the team meetings I have with the staff every month as well. So that will be taken forward there.
Because you would agree, I'm sure, not to put any words in anyone's mouth, but an improvement plan must improve the situation for the staff, mustn't it?
It's two ways. It's an improvement plan, which also brings the staff with them as well.
Yeah.
Because they are the key. I've rebuilt this team twice, and this is the best team we've got. They're young, energetic, they really want to progress. And to hear what Tracy said about the team as well, having come in with fresh eyes, just goes to show the calibre of officers we've got here, and we need to retain them as well. Because they are our future, that they are the council's future, undoubtedly.
I think what you say is very true, because if we don't have this retention and appreciation, we're left with insurance. We know what insurance are. President,
right. Okay. Accepted. Yes. Right. Councillor Summers and then Councillor Mill.
Now, this will be the last one, but it just caught me with IT. It's the second concern I've heard from two different departments on IT recently, and the reason it comes up, it really comes to me. I've attended a few meetings where all councils, local councils get together, and the big thing is all about being about IT. And I've listened to a lot of IT people, but there's an awful lot out there, and I find it hard to understand that we've had an IT department for a long time that are being used for other things also, but I'm not going to get into it. That our IT in the place it's at, and I'm not sure what we can do about it or what you can do. Do you have any suggestions? Because I've heard there's some good companies out there.
Yeah.
Why aren't we using them, and why aren't we improving our IT?
Okay, so the good news is that the head of IT, who is another interim, He is actually reviewing the systems at the moment, but as part of what we're doing, we're making recommendations about systems and a way forward. So the good news is it is being reviewed as we speak at the moment. And I think these things have to be hand in glove. You can't just look at one part of it. If you're then got a bottleneck at your IT, so it is being looked at in the holistic sense.
Thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Mill.
Okay, this really will be my last question. Another area of the planning service which appears not to have been looked at either by the press review or by scrutiny in March is validation. And I just want to be careful to, in recognition of what Kevin Bishop was saying a minute ago, appreciate the silent and backroom work that the validation officers do. And as members, we do sometimes nonetheless have to go back and say, well, where's drawing X and where's the supporting document? And it's usually very quickly supplied, and that's a good thing. And we don't very often find defective drawings. I can think of one application which had to be invalidated because I had to point out that the applicant had filled in the application form untruthfully, but I don't suppose that occurs very often. The one little niggle that I do have is over tree works applications, and so very frequently one sees tree works applications quite literally a childlike scribble on the back of an envelope, and that appears to be the top and bottom of the application. And I just wonder whether officers could comment on whether there is a need to raise standards in that area or not, or whether they feel comfortable with the situation as it is.
It isn't part of the planning service, so we don't actually deal with that area.
Environment.
By environment, yeah. So it's
Shouldn't
not
planning validation be slightly more integrated into the process?
We do
trees.
process the application when they come in, but they are dealt with by the other half of the directorate.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question very succinctly.
Okay, there's scope for assuming that perhaps at another time. Right, okay, well, to wrap up, I think we've reviewed the responses from the executive, and there's been questions raised there. And I think rather than us as a committee coming up with recommendations as opposed to the response to recommendations, what we would like you to do is, obviously, when the minutes of this meeting gets published as a public record, is with your improvement plan process, reflect the conversations that I think have been very helpful. And I think we've teased out communication that needs to improve, relationships need to be improved rather than processes, and a greater acknowledgement of the roles and the situations there. So I think if these minutes and this public record can be reflected in your continuing improvement process, I think that would be the purpose of this meeting. So you won't get key recommendations, but my key recommendation from the chair is to review the minutes and the discussions that we've had, and help in any way you can reflect those in your improvement. And then the second point I would make to conclude is that whilst I accept there are very good reasons why the improvement plan wasn't here to scrutinise today, one of the lessons learned, I think, for all scrutiny committees is if a report isn't ready, that doesn't matter. You know, key pointers or the things that you read out at the meeting, that will suffice if, because of whatever reason, reports aren't ready. And I think the problem that the scrutiny process has is that because reports aren't ready, things get kicked down the can. And I think we, as a council, to help progress matters. We can't think of only talking about things once a plan is ready, because I think today's meeting may help in that improvement plan process. So that would be my response to that, and my plea as chair, and to all of the
I
comments.
think today was very useful.
All of the comments that have been made today, if they can be encapsulated or reflected upon in your continuing improvement, then I think that will have made today's meeting worthwhile. Okay, well, thank you for that. I'd like to thank Councillor Harvey and Councillor Milne for attending virtually, and officers who were also in attendance virtually listening in. And we come to the conclusion of the meeting. There are no other items on the agenda. Just to note, the next meeting is Monday, the 12th of December, and that will be here at Plough Lane. So thank you for all of your contributions today, both committee members and officers and cabinet member. And I would now say that this meeting is formally closed and ask for the live stream to be finished.
Confirm as